inshallah, the series with the fourth Caliph, who is Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu. So we start today, inshallah, with Uthman. Uthman is the third Caliph. We will, inshallah, we'll start his life from the beginning, from when he was born, his early life, before Islam, when he embraced Islam, when he married the daughter of the Prophet ﷺ, and then how he migrated to Abyssinia first, to Al-Habasha, and then he did the other hijrah to Medina. Then when the Prophet ﷺ died, he followed the first two Khulafa, Abu Bakr and Umar, and then he became the Khalifa. We will see how he became the Khalifa, how he was elected when we get there. So we'll do inshallah a biography from the beginning, chronologically, with chronologic order. So he was born in Mecca 6 years after the elephant incident, Aamul Fil, the year of the elephant. You know that the Arabs in Mecca and the region they didn't have a proper calendar at the time, so they used to get orientated with the big events. So in those years, the most important incident that had occurred was the elephant incident. You all know the incident when Abraha came from Yemen. He wanted to destroy the Kaaba, and it's in the Quran also. Allah made the elephant stop, and then eventually he sent this army of birds to destroy the army of Abraha. So this big event was taken as a mark, to count years. So the Prophet ﷺ was born in the same year of the elephant. Uthman ibn Affan was born 6 years later. So he was younger than the Prophet ﷺ by 6 years. He was 6 years younger. All right, so he was from the Banu Umayyah. He was a Qurayshi. Of course, Quraysh was the tribe that was where the inhabitants of Mecca were all from the tribe of Quraysh. And within Quraysh there were many small clans or sub-clans, families. So two of the strongest ones and the most prominent tribes or clans, we should say, were the Banu Hashim and the Banu Umayyah. All right, the Prophet ﷺ was from Banu Hashim, and we'll see how. And Uthman ibn Affan was from Banu Umayyah, but the two of the families connect at a point. So the full name of Uthman ibn Affan, or just to mention 6 grandfathers of Uthman ibn Affan, he was Uthman ibn Affan, ibn Abi al-As, ibn Umayyah, ibn Abd al-Shams, ibn Abd Manaf. Ibn Abd Manaf. Abd Manaf is where he joins together with the Prophet ﷺ. So he joins together with the Prophet ﷺ at the 4th generation, the 4th grandfather. Okay? Uthman ibn Affan, ibn al-As, ibn Umayyah, ibn Abd al-Shams, ibn Abd Manaf, ibn Qusay, ibn Kilab. So at Ibn Abd Manaf, they joined together. The Prophet ﷺ was Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Abd al-Muttalib. His grandfather was Abd al-Muttalib. Ibn Hashim, that's why they're called Banu Hashim. Ibn Abd Manaf. So Abd Manaf had 2 sons, okay, Hashim and Abd al-Shams. So from Hashim comes the tree of the Prophet ﷺ, the chain, and from the other one, from Abd al-Shams, comes Uthman. So they were far cousins, 4 generations apart. His laqab, you know that the Arabs used to always have a laqab, which is like a nickname by which they were known. In some cases, this laqab took over the original name. They always had the nasab, which is the lineage, which we just mentioned. The lineage of Uthman, we mentioned. Uthman ibn Affan, ibn al-As, ibn Umayyah, ibn Abd al-Shams, ibn Abd Manaf, and so on. Then they had the laqab, which was like a nickname. Uthman was called, his laqab was Dhun Nurayn, and we'll explain why. This means the one who possesses 2 lights, the owner of 2 lights. And then they had a third thing, which was the kunya. The kunya was also a very important name by which they were known, and in some cases these would also take over the original name. This was Abu, whatever the name of the son or the daughter, usually the son, the oldest son. So the laqab of Uthman was Dhun Nurayn. His kunya was Abu Abdullah. Abu Abdullah, because Abu Abdullah was the first male child that he had, and he was actually a grandson of the Prophet ﷺ because he was the son of Ruqayya. We'll get to that. But he died very young. So Uthman ibn Affan ibn Abdul As ibn Umayyah ibn Abd Shams ibn Abd Manaf, that's his lineage. His laqab Dhun Nurayn, the possessor of two lights. His kunya Abu Abdullah. By the time he died, he had 14 children. 14, 1-4, by the time he died. But all of those children were born after the Prophet ﷺ passed away. All right, so the only son, the only child that he had during the life of the Prophet ﷺ was Abdullah, by whom he is called Abu Abdullah. And he passed away when he was very young. He was 6 years old. And in that time, you know that children, it was very common that they would pass away in childhood. This happened to the Prophet ﷺ himself. And so he had 14 children, many children. The only one I think I would mention, apart from Abdullah, who was this grandson of the Prophet, is going to be Aban ibn Uthman. Aban, who was not a Sahabi, because remember he was born after the Prophet passed away. Aban became a very well-known scholar. He was an alim, and he was a very famous narrator of hadith, and he was the author of the first booklet of Sirah. All right, the first book of Sirah that we still have to this day is Ibn Ishaq. But the first booklet that was written in Sirah, from which Ibn Ishaq took a lot, was written by Aban ibn Uthman. And this booklet is no longer with us. Nobody knows where it is, but the early ulama saw it and took from it, like Ibn Ishaq. So Ibn Ishaq is the oldest book of Sirah that we can find nowadays. But we know that Ibn Ishaq took a lot from the book that Aban ibn Uthman ibn Affan wrote on the Sirah. All right, Uthman ibn Affan was a very shy person. He is very well known for his haya, in Arabic haya, his shyness. Haya is actually more than shyness. It includes another level of shyness. It's it's being very modest and having very high adab in essence. So Uthman was known for his haya. He was a very honest person. In his jahiliyyah, he never used to drink or get involved in any haram practices. I mean, haram that became haram later, or let's say low practices, or things like drinking and spending the nights talking about valueless stuff. Things that were allowed and were normal among the people, like drinking, he didn't do. And some of the Sahaba did it before they became Muslims. It was Jahiliyyah, it was not forbidden, so they used to drink. Uthman bin Affan was not one of those. He never drank, he never stole anything, he never lied. He was a very, very honest and righteous man. He was loved by his people. He was very, very much respected by the Quraysh in Mecca. Remember that Umar ibn al-Khattab, when we spoke about him, he was also very much respected, but in another way. He was a very brave man. He was a warrior. He was a diplomat as well. He was a very just and fair person. Umar ibn al-Khattab. Uthman was another type of character, but he was also very, very loved and respected among the people of Quraysh in Mecca. His physical aspect, he was a thin man. He was not very strong, like Umar ibn al-Khattab, for example, who was known to have strong muscles. Uthman ibn Affan was a fairly tall and thin person. He had the color of the skin that the Quraysh used to have, which was brownish, reddish color. He had big teeth and he had curly hair. Those are some of the descriptions we have about his physical features. He was one of those who could read and write, just like Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab, we mentioned. He was one of the few people in that society who could read and write. Uthman bin Affan was also a person who could read and write. All right, how he became a Muslim? He is one of the as-sabiqun al-awwalun. All right, he was one of the first Muslims. He was actually the fourth man to embrace Islam. The fourth man to embrace Islam. The first one was Ali ibn Abi Talib, and then Zayd ibn Haritha, who was the boy that was living with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, and then the fourth man was Sayyidina Uthman ibn Affan. And this is because Sayyidina Abu Bakr did da'wah to him. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, and this shows the status of Sayyidina Uthman in the eyes of Sayyidina Abu Bakr also. He was a good friend of him, and Abu Bakr did a lot of da'wah. He started talking to people even when Islam was still in the period of secret da'wah. Abu Bakr called, they say, about 12 people to Islam. The first one of them was Uthman. The first person he went to and spoke to about Islam was Sayyidina Uthman. So he immediately accepted Islam, and this is mainly because of two things. One is his natural inclination to fitrah, as we said. When Islam came to Uthman, it was such a natural thing. It was befitting his understanding of the world. So immediately he accepted Islam. The second thing is that he had a signal, a very straightforward signal. When he was a businessman, by the way, a very successful businessman, and he was not the kind of businessmen who are very aggressive and very, like some of the Quraysh. They were actually called Quraysh. The tribe of Quraysh, I think I mentioned this before, means little shark, right? Qirsh is a shark, Quraysh is a small shark, and this is because they were very aggressive businessmen. They were like sharks, some of them. But Sayyidina Uthman was not that type of businessman. He was a very modest, honest, calm, shy man, but Allah gave him success in all his business transactions. And Allah does this. Not all businessmen are sharks or, tigers. They sometimes are you find them still nowadays. It's not the common thing, but you find some businessmen who had a very good akhlaq and very good character, and still Allah gives them wealth, because wealth belongs to Allah and He distributes it as He likes, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Uthman ibn Affan was a very successful businessman, and he used to travel to Syria and to Yemen for business trips. He used to do rihlatu shita'i wa sayf. So once he was coming back from the Sham, from the area of what we know as Syria today, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, Palestine, and when he was returning to Mecca, they were camping, they were sleeping, spending the night over at a place. So they set up their tents, and in the middle of the night, he heard a voice saying, "O you who are sleeping, rush back to Mecca, for indeed Ahmad has finally come forth from Mecca. Don't waste your time, go back to Mecca. Ahmad is already there, has already appeared." Ahmad is, as you know, the name used in the Injil, in the, what do you say in English? The book that was sent to Isa alayhi salam. Not the Bible, what's the Injil, how do you translate it? The Gospel. Anyway, the previous books revealed to the previous messengers and prophets, Ahmad was the name used to announce that Muhammad, that the last messenger, was coming. So Uthman heard this voice, somebody saying, "Ahmad is already in Mecca, you should rush back to Mecca." And we know from the books of Sirah that the jinn became very excited about the coming of the Prophet ﷺ. It was one of the signs, and this is in the Burda, the Qasidatul Burda, if I'm not mistaken, that some of the jinn started to cry and shout that Ahmed has finally come. So Uthman bin Affan heard this voice coming from nowhere saying, the last prophet has arrived. So as soon as he arrived to Mecca, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq gives him da'wah and he accepts Islam immediately. Then we're going to, of course, go through his life quite briefly because we want to cover all of it, if not in one session, in 2 sessions, inshallah. So we have to move on quite fast. Later on, he marries Ruqayya. Ruqayya is one of the 4 daughters of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He marries Ruqayya when Khadija is still alive, radiallahu anha. So Khadija prepares his daughter Ruqayya for this marriage, and he never saw any of her other daughters get married, but she saw her daughter Ruqayya get married to Uthman ibn Affan. They had the son Abdullah. He was never punished when he became a Muslim. He was in the first period of Islam. He was never punished physically in the same way that other Sahaba used to be punished, like Bilal and others, because he was very, very respected, as I just mentioned. Apart from a minor incident with his uncle, one of his uncles once retained him in his house and tied him up with chains and didn't let him go. And he said, I will not let you go until you give up your new religion. You should stay with the religion of your grandfathers and you should never follow this Muhammad. So he said, I will not leave Islam no matter what you do to me. So he spent, we don't know how long, but he spent a period of time until the uncle said, this is useless, he's not going to give up Islam, so he let him go. Apart from that, he didn't suffer a lot from the physical punishments and inflictions that the Quraysh, the kuffar of Quraysh used to inflict upon the Sahaba. Alright, so we get to his hijrah, his first hijrah. He's one of the Sahaba who did 2 hijrahs. He's one of the few who did 2 hijrahs, 2 emigrations. One to Al-Habasha, to Abyssinia in Africa, and the second hijrah, the very well-known hijrah to Medina. So there were 2 hijrahs to Habasha, to Abyssinia. He joined the first batch. He went with his wife, with Ruqayya, to Abyssinia, and he spent there a period of time. It is said that he is the first person to do a hijrah with his wife, and there is actually a hadith, I don't know if it's a sahih hadith, that he is the first man to do hijrah with his wife from the times of Lut alayhi salam. Uthman is the first man to do hijrah for Allah with his family from the time of Lut alayhi salam. Then when they're in Habasha, they hear that the Quraysh, this was a rumor which was not fully true, that the Quraysh had embraced Islam and they had accepted Islam in Mecca, so they went back. This was not true, this was only a few Quraysh. So he returns to Mecca. He was always associated with the Quran, Uthman radiallahu anhu, from the beginning of his Islam. He is the one actually, and we'll see this through his life. And if you remember the talk we did just before Ramadan, of how the Sahaba dealt with the crisis of the Quran, we called it, how the Quran, the Mus'haf, was compiled, and so on. He is one of the main persons involved. He is the one who narrated the famous hadith, خيركم من تعلم القرآن وعلمه. خيركم من تعلم القرآن وعلمه. The best of you are those who learn the Quran and teach it to others. This hadith is narrated by Uthman ibn Affan. It is very well known that he played a huge, important role in the preservation of the Quran, as I just mentioned, and we'll go, inshallah, into this a little bit more in detail when we get to his Khilafah. And he was associated with the Quran until the day he died. When he was murdered, he was reading the Quran, he had the Mus'haf in his hands, and his blood actually fell on the pages of the Mus'haf. So some of the actions he did during the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. One very famous thing he did, because he was a rich man, he used to donate and give so much for the sake of Allah. He used to give the Prophet ﷺ so much in the way of Allah. He was a very generous person. Also Abu Bakr and Umar, if you remember, used to do this, and they used to compete. And Abu Bakr once spent all his money, everything he had. So this was the case of Sayyidina Uthman Bin Affan also. He was not a very, very strong man, physically speaking, as I just said. So you needed the Sahaba of all kinds. Some were warriors, some were very good at war strategics, like Khalid ibn al-Walid. Some were diplomats. So everyone could contribute in a different way. Sayyidina Uthman ibn Affan definitely was, he was very well known for, and you will notice when we go through his life, that he was very well known for these two things. One is the Quran. He was always associated with the Quran. The second one is he was very generous. He was always spending in the way of Allah. So now we're going to go through some of his main actions or things that he did during the time of the Prophet, during the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and most of them have to do with spending. So one thing he did is he bought the well of Ruma, Bi'r Ruma. This is a well that was in Medina. So after they did the hijrah to Medina, imagine the first batch of the Sahaba to arrive in Medina was about 300 people. 300 new people were living in the city. About 300 Muslims arrived in Medina, and they needed water. Okay, so the population of Medina increased. 300 people, and then more came, and the numbers were increasing very, very quickly. So they needed water, and the water of Medina, which was a very, very valuable resource, of course, as it always is, but especially in that land, which is the desert of Arabia, the water of Medina was mainly controlled by the Jews. They were the owners of most of the wells in Medina. And the water was scarce. This is the middle of Arabia, you know. So one of the main wells was, thank you, the well of Ruma. Ruma was a big well, and it was the most convenient to the Muslims. This well was owned by a Jew man, and he used to charge quite an amount of money. For a bucket of water, he used to charge, they say, a mud. A mud is this amount of grain, wheat or whatever. So imagine how many buckets you need for daily life. So the Muslims were suffering from lack of water, and the Prophet ﷺ said, who can buy the well of Ruma and he will get the Jannah? So Sayyidina Uthman ibn Affan said in his mind that he wanted to buy the well of Ruma for the Muslims. Now he went to the Jew man. Jews are very clever, you know about this, and they do business and they like money. The Jew man had like the tree of the golden apples, you know. Everybody needed water, and they were ready to pay for it. But they were paying so much, you know, that it was not feasible to continue like that. So the man said, I'm not selling it. The Jew man said, I'm not selling it at first. He said, I can rent one day to you, or a few days, a week. So Uthman ibn Affan said, okay, why don't you let me hire the well one day, every other day. So they agreed on an amount of money so that Uthman would hire the well for every other day. So he would have he will have the well one day, the Jew man would have it the other day, and he could still sell the water. So the Jew man said, okay, I can still make money. You're going to pay me more than if I sell the water and I don't have to work. So all right, and the well is still mine. So what did Uthman do? He said to all the Muslims, in my day, you can just go and take as much water as you want. So what this caused was that nobody went to buy any water from the Jew man the next day. They would wait for the day of Uthman and they would get free water. So eventually the Jew said to Uthman, okay, I will just sell it to you. So they agreed on 35,000 dirhams. 35,000 dirhams was, you can calculate the value of silver. In the time, if you calculate the equivalent, it will be nowadays more than $1 million US dollars. It was a huge amount of money. He spent that money and he gave it away. He said, fi sabilillah, he made it a waqf. And this well, subhanallah, is still in Medina to this day. Because remember, in Mecca they had Zamzam, and Zamzam is flowing all the time, and they didn't have that problem with water. But when they got to Medina, they faced this problem with water, and until Uthman Bin Affan bought the well of Ruma, and it's still there today, 14 centuries, and it's still giving water to the people. Imagine what this is, what reward this englobes, and we ask Allah to reward Sayyidina Uthman for this. The Ottomans did a very good job to maintain it and to restore it. Nowadays, I don't know how it is with the Al Saud in charge of, they don't always look after the heritage of the Sahaba very well. But the well is still there, and if you know somebody in Medina who knows his way around, he can take you to the well of Ruma. Another thing he did is he equipped the whole Jaysh al-Usra. Jaysh al-Usra was the army of difficulty. This was the expedition of difficulty, it was called. This was the Battle of Tabuk. The Battle of Tabuk, which never actually happened. It was an expedition that the Prophet ﷺ organized, actually his last expedition, his last ghazwa before he passed away, ﷺ, was the ghazwa of Tabuk. And it was in the middle of the summer. They were expecting a huge attack from the Byzantines, from the north. So the Prophet ﷺ decided to go out and to meet the enemy as far as possible from Medina. So to have the battle as far as possible from the city. And it was the middle of the summer, it was very, very hot. They didn't have much wealth at that time. So the Prophet ﷺ again said, who can help equip the army? So he did a fundraising announcement at the masjid. And this was, so fundraising has always been a means of getting the Muslims who have money to help the others and to help the good causes. This has always been sunnah in the Muslim Ummah, starting with the Prophet ﷺ. He used to do fundraising among his Sahaba. So he said, who can help buy animals and weapons for the army to go and fight the Romans, the Byzantines? So Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu said, I will provide 100 camels with all their equipments and everything. And the Prophet ﷺ said, thank you very much, we still need more. So he said, I will provide another 100. The Prophet ﷺ made dua for him and said, thank you. And he said, we still need more, who can help? So Uthman said, I will provide another 100. So that's 300. So the Prophet ﷺ said, this is enough, and nothing that Uthman does after today will harm him. That's another thing Uthman did during the life of the Prophet ﷺ. The expansion of the mosque, another thing he did, and this has to do with spending again. Towards the end of the life of the Prophet ﷺ, he said, I would like to make an expansion to the Masjid al-Nabawi. So again, Uthman Bin Affan said, I will buy a plot of land which is right next to the mosque, and then you can, O Rasulullah, expand the mosque. So he did. He bought a piece of land which was next to the mosque, and the masjid was then expanded. And this part of the mosque is part of the Rawdah. The Rawdah, which the Prophet ﷺ said it is like heaven on earth. It's part of the Jannah in the earth. So imagine how many people again have prayed since This happened 14 centuries ago, and what the reward of Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu will be, inshaAllah. So these are some of the things that he used to do, that he did during the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, I would like to mention some of the ahadith pertaining to Uthman, regarding the fada'il or the virtues of Uthman radiallahu anhu. There are many ahadith that mention the fada'il of Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu, but we'll just mention some of them. The hadith of the Bustan, I think we mentioned this hadith already previously. It's a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ was sitting in one of the gardens of Medina, in a Bustan in Medina, and somebody knocked the door or called from outside that he wanted to enter. So you know that Abu Bakr and Umar came, and then when Uthman came and called or knocked the door, the Prophet ﷺ said to the Sahabi who was in charge of opening the door, he said, "Go and tell whoever is at the door that he is welcome to come in, and that he will enter Jannah, that he will enter the garden after a calamity that will strike him, after a balwa, a calamity or an affliction or a trial that he will suffer." So the Sahabi went to the door and he said, the Prophet ﷺ says, "You are welcome, come in, and that you will be in Jannah because of something that will happen to you." So the Prophet ﷺ announced or predicted already that he would be murdered and that he would be a shaheed in several occasions. We'll mention some of them. And that he will be in the Jannah, he also mentioned in several occasions. Of course, he was one of the 10 al-Mubashsharuna bil-Jannah, one of the 10 Sahaba who were announced during their lifetime that they will be in the garden. He was one of them. Then there's the hadith of Uhud. The hadith of Uhud we've mentioned already because it is with regard to Sayyidina Abu Bakr, Sayyidina Umar, and Sayyidina Uthman. It talks about the three of them. It is the hadith when the Prophet ﷺ and these three Sahaba, Abu Bakr, Umar, and Uthman, climbed up the mountain, and they were on top of Uhud, and the mountain, they felt a kind of a shaking in the mountain. So the Prophet ﷺ said, "Uskun ya Uhud," be calm, calm down, Uhud, for all that is on you is a prophet, a Nabi, a Siddiq, and two Shaheeds. There's only Nabiyyun wa Siddiqun wa Shahidan. A prophet, so himself, a Siddiq, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, and two Shaheeds. Umar ibn al-Khattab, he was murdered, as we saw in his life, that he was murdered by this Majusi, this fire worshipper in the masjid, and he announced that Uthman bin Affan will also be killed. There's another hadith where some of the Sahaba were sitting with the Prophet ﷺ in the night, and somebody passed by, and he was wrapped with a mantle, so they could not see his face properly. There was a man passing by, and it was in the night time, and the Prophet ﷺ said, "That man will enter Jannah." Or he was talking about a fitna. He was talking about a fitna that will happen, and he said that man will enter Jannah, and he will be in that day he will be killed unjustly. When that fitna happens, that man will be killed unjustly. So the narrator of the hadith goes, and this is Abdullah ibn Umar. Abdullah ibn Umar is the one who narrates the hadith. He goes to see who that man was, and when the man turns around, he was Uthman ibn Affan. In another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ told Uthman, he said, Allah might give you a shirt, or Allah will give you a shirt if the munafiqun, if the hypocrites try to take it off you. Don't let them until you meet me. Don't let them take this shirt off you until you meet me. Now this shirt, he didn't know what it was at the time. Most of the ulama agree, especially after what happened later on, that this shirt the Prophet ﷺ mentioned was referring to the Khilafah. And we will see how he was unjustly assassinated at the end of his life when we get there, inshallah, I think in the next session. Some of the other virtues of Uthman ibn Affan and some of the hadiths that mention him. Also, the Prophet ﷺ said, لِكُلِّ نَبِيٍّ رَفِيقٍ وَرَفِيقِي عُثْمَانٍ لِكُلِّ نَبِيٍّ رَفِيقٍ وَرَفِيقِي عُثْمَانٍ, which means each prophet had a friend or a close companion. Rafiq is a close companion. And my Rafiq, my close friend, is Uthman. And again, the Mufassirun, the ulama who make sharh of the ahadith, they say that he means friend in the garden, in Jannah. So each prophet has a friend, and my friend in Jannah will be Uthman. So how can we not have a high and good opinion of Uthman when the Prophet ﷺ himself testified to the purity of his conduct, and that he would have a good seal to his life, and that he would be a shaheed, and that he would be his rafiq, his close companion in the garden. The Prophet ﷺ also made a very beautiful dua for Uthman. He said, "May Allah forgive you, O Uthman, for what you have made concealed or apparent until the Yawm al-Qiyamah." May Allah forgive you for anything you do until the Yawm al-Qiyamah. And in fact, he said after he gave the donation for the army of difficulty, he said, as we mentioned, that nothing will harm Uthman after that action he did. So regarding his marriages, we mentioned that he married the first time he married to the daughter of the Prophet ﷺ, Ruqayya radiyallahu anha. Okay, Ruqayya, however, gave birth to Abdullah and then passed away. She passed away during the Battle of Badr. And in fact, Uthman ibn Affan was excused from attending the Battle of Badr because his wife was dying. She was in a very bad healthy situation, and the Prophet ﷺ excused Uthman from attending the Battle of Badr. Although he said, "You are one of the Badris," so he actually assigned a part of the booty for Uthman, but he was allowed to stay in Medina because his wife was about to pass away, and she actually passed away during the Battle of Badr. When the Muslims were coming back from Badr, celebrating the victory and very happy for the victory of Badr, they found that Ruqayya had passed away and had already been buried. So the Prophet ﷺ himself did not attend the funeral, the janazah of his daughter Ruqayya. So Uthman ibn Affan was left with one son, with Abdullah, who was a young boy, and with no wife. And shortly after, the Prophet ﷺ offered him his other daughter, Kulthum. He said, you can marry my daughter Kulthum. And this is also something that is natural, especially when there is a child. They say it's one of the fiqh rules, al-khalatu fi manzilati al-um. Al-khala is the sister of the mother, so the auntie from the mother's side. She is in the same rank as the mother. So if there is a child, it is natural that first of all Uthman needs to get married, to have a wife to look after this boy, and secondly If it is the boy's aunt, then even better. So the Prophet ﷺ offered him his other daughter, Kulthum, and he marries to the second daughter of the Prophet ﷺ, Kulthum, and this is why he is called Dhun Nurayn, the one with two lights. There's a hadith that says nobody has ever been married to two daughters of a Prophet except for Uthman. So this is something special to Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu anhu. And that is why he is called Dhun Nurayn. Then the Prophet ﷺ passes away. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu takes on the Khilafah for the first 2 years, as we studied previously. Sayyidina Uthman is always supporting and giving good advice to the first Khalifa, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. Then when Abu Bakr as-Siddiq passes away, Umar ibn al-Khattab takes on the Khilafah. Uthman is the first one to give him bay'ah, to give him the homage, to the oath of allegiance. He's the first one to give him bay'ah. And then when Umar ibn al-Khattab passes away, then Uthman takes on the Khilafah. And this is in a different way. So this is interesting to see how the Khilafah passes first from the Prophet to Abu Bakr, then from Abu Bakr to Umar, and now from Umar to Uthman. It's all in different ways. The Prophet ﷺ didn't explicitly say that Abu Bakr had to be the next Khalifa, the successor of the Prophet in terms of leadership. But he gave a few indicators. All right? Then Abu Bakr makes it very clear and explicit. He says, my successor is Umar ibn al-Khattab, after taking counsel from the Sahaba and so on. But he says clearly the Khilafah should go to Umar ibn al-Khattab. Now Umar, when he is dying, and remember that he was stopped in the masjid and he was alive for a few days. The Sahaba obviously asked him, Ya Umar, who are you going to appoint as the next Khalifa? So he said, if I don't say a specific person, then somebody before me has done it, who was the Prophet ﷺ. If I appoint somebody clearly, then somebody before me has already also done it, who was Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. What I'm going to do is something new. He did something which was not done by the Prophet or by Abu Bakr. So Umar said, I will make a council of 6 people, and those 6 people will have to figure out who the next Khalifa is. So he didn't want to have that burden. For example, Abu Bakr was very, very convinced, and he was very certain about this matter, and he said, it is Umar who has to be the leader. And this was, like I said, after taking counsel from the Sahaba and making sure that this was the right decision. However, Umar decided to make a council of 6 Sahaba and let the matter be discussed among them and let them decide who would be the next Khalifa. Now, who are these 6 Sahaba? They are the 6 remaining from the Ashara al-Mubashsharuna bil-Jannah, the 10 companions who were promised the garden during their lifetime. The 6 that were remaining, that were still alive at the time when Umar was dying, they were the ones who were appointed to be in that council. They are Uthman, to start with, Uthman ibn Affan, Ali ibn Abi Talib, Abdul Rahman ibn Auf, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, Talha, and Zubair. And then Ibn Umar, Abdullah ibn Umar, was also in the group, but he was not to be appointed. Umar made it very clear that the 7th man, who was Abdullah ibn Umar, his own son, would be in the group as a witness, or he could discuss and give his opinion, but he could never be elected because he didn't want to make it a dynasty. At that time, he wanted to make it clear that his son would not be the next Khalifa, that it was not a monarchy or a dynasty. So he said, my son Abdullah ibn Umar will be in the group, but he is not to be elected. So one of the other 6 has to be elected, and you discuss it among yourselves. Shall I continue for a little bit? Yeah? About 5 more minutes, and then we'll open for questions, inshallah. So we'll just get to how he was elected the Khalifa of the Muslims from among these 6 Sahaba. So remember, it was Uthman, Ali, Abdul Rahman ibn Auf, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, Talha, and Zubair. 6, plus Abdullah ibn Umar, who was not to be elected. So Zubair said, I will give my right to Ali. I don't want to be the leader of the Muslims. I will pass it to Ali. Alright? Talha said, I will pass my right to Uthman. And Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, who reached China. You know that this Sahabi reached China and he built a mosque. And I don't know if he's buried there, but there's a famous mosque called the Mosque of Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas in China. Sa'd said, I will pass it to Abdul Rahman ibn Auf. Alright? So 3 of them stepped back. They said, we do not want to be the Khalifa. We can now choose from these 3, or the 3 of you can decide who is the next Khalifa. So 3 were remaining now: Uthman, Ali, and Abdul Rahman ibn Auf. So Abdul Rahman ibn Auf also said, all right, I will not be the Khalifa, but do you two agree to let me be the judge or the referee of this situation? Both of them said yes. He did it privately. So he went to Uthman and he said, and he made sure that they would accept any of the 2 decisions. So he asked Uthman, oh Uthman, do you agree that I am the referee and that if I choose Ali, you will be happy? And Uthman said, of course. If you say it is Ali, I will be happy. If you say it is me, I will take on the responsibility. He went then to Ali privately and he said, he made the same question, and Ali said the same thing. He said, I will be happy either way. So then Abdul Rahman ibn Auf went to the Sahaba, to the major Sahaba who were not within this little group, and he again consulted them, asked for advice, and he found that all of the Sahaba agreed that it should be Uthman ibn Affan. So he said, Uthman is the next Khalifa, and Ali ibn Abi Talib said, I am happy with the decision. And he was the first one to give bay'ah. And then the rest of the Ashara, and then all the Sahaba gave bay'ah to Sayyidina Uthman ibn Affan. This is how he was elected and how he became the 3rd Khalifa of Islam. Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu said, after the bay'ah was given to Sayyidina Uthman, he said, we have given authority to the best person who was remaining among us. This is Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu. He said, we have given authority to the best one, to the best man among us. So I think inshallah next month we'll do his khilafah. We'll do what happened in his caliphate, the things he achieved, the accomplishments, the lands he conquered, and some of the major events that happened during his khilafah. His caliphate was very long. It was the longest. Remember that Abu Bakr only ruled for 2 years, that Sayyidina Umar ruled for 10 years, which was a long khilafah, and then Uthman ruled for 12 years. It was even longer than Umar's, And then Ali ibn Abi Talib, it is between 5 and 6 years. So in total, remember, we mentioned this hadith a few times, in total it is 30 years, 30 years. And the Prophet ﷺ said in this hadith that we mentioned that the Khilafah or the right Khilafah would be for 30 years after his death. And then after that, it will be there would be fitnas, and there would be chaos and dynasties, different kingdoms and dynasties. And this is truly exactly what happened. So this is why we call the first four khulafa, we call them al-khulafa ur-rashidun, the right guided khulafa, because the Prophet ﷺ himself said that they would be rightly guided, and then after that there would be chaos and inner fighting and fitnas. And already in the times of Uthman, the end of his khilafah, these fitnas started to appear. In the time of Ali, they were much more apparent and clear. And then after Ali, it was the door was open to fitna, and all these things that you all know about happened. But we'll also see some of the things he did. He married, of course, many times after during the life of the Prophet ﷺ. He only married to his two daughters, and both of them died, by the way, during the time of the Prophet. Remember that the Prophet ﷺ saw all his children die except for Fatima. Fatima died 6 months after the Prophet passed away, but he saw all his children die, and a lot of his grandchildren also. So Uthman bin Affan had to bury his first wife Ruqayya, his second wife Kulthum, also the daughter of the Prophet ﷺ, his son Abdullah, because Abdullah died at the age of 6, and then he never got married until the Prophet ﷺ passed away, and then he did marry after that 4 other wives. That's when he had the 14 children that we mentioned. So all of that, inshallah, how he compiled the Mus'haf, and some other stories, inshallah, and how he was at the end of his life, how he was murdered, we will do, inshallah, in the next session, which will be next month, inshallah. Now, if there are any brief questions, I will try to answer. If I don't know the answer, I will write it down and get back to you, inshallah, next time.
Ask any questions, you can come forward and use this mic, or you can write on a piece of paper and pass it forward.
So, for gentlemen, any questions? No questions? Okay. That means it's all clear. Allah. Just to mention that the intention of these classes, again, of this series of studying the lives of the Sahaba, is none but to get close to Allah, to learn from the character and the lives of these great men who were the closest to the Prophet ﷺ, who is the light of this existence. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as a light to humanity, and he says it in the ayah, inna arsalnaka mubashiran wa nadhira wa sirajan munira, as a light giving lamp. We sent you as a light giving lamp. So this light of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this siraj munir, of course, illuminated the whole of existence, but it illuminated first and most those who were close to him. And those are the Sahaba. These men were the people who were closest to the Prophet ﷺ, and there is no doubt that they got something from him. And all of these ahadith that we just mentioned only show the closest, the close relationship they had with the Prophet and to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is for us to learn and to reflect upon and to try to practice and apply it in our lives, inshallah. If there are no questions, inshallah, we'll see you next month for the second session of Sayyidina Uthman Ibn Affan radiallahu anhu.